All right, the last show we did was our 53-man roster projection. This is now the 53-man roster aftermath after the initial cuts have happened. I'm Brooke Kirchhofer alongside Mike Triplett and Nick Underhill. We're going to break down everything that happened today, the surprise cuts, where we went wrong in our 53-man roster projections, and also what could maybe happen as the week goes on.
Yeah, a lot of fascinating decisions today to get through, but some fascinating decisions aren't always that fascinating. That's why you should always check out Toro Hospital. If you have medical needs, the LCMC network, go check them out if you need anything done. And we're presented by PJ's Coffee, so make sure you start every day with them at one of their various locations all around the city. And if you are not signed up to our website yet, use the code 2023 kickoff to get 20% off your first payment. You can read about the roster autopsy, everything going on in the season, everything happening with the Saints. So get the best information by signing up to the site today. And of course, if you need a car, go check out my guy, Matt Bowers. They have dealerships all over the Gulf Coast region. Any type of car you want, they can get you in and they will take care of you. I vouch for their dealerships because they always take care of you. The NewOrleans.Football show is proudly presented by PJ's Coffee. PJ's Coffee has some of the best drinks that you can find. They have locations all over the city. They have pastries and everything else you need to get your day started. So go check them out.
For fast relief coffee.
Mike Hoss here. When the AC goes out and it's hot outside, every second counts. For over 40 years, Keefe's AC Heating and Electrical has helped thousands of families stay cool in the sizzling hot months. Keefe's Get You Cool in 3 hours or less guarantee is what our customers love the most on the North or South Shore. Call Keefe's. We'll get you cool in 3 hours or less guaranteed.
Keefe's Air Conditioning and Heating.
And now electrical.
For fast relief coffee.
Moe's Barbecue is located in Metairie. They have your game day needs taken care of. Whether you're tailgating or watching the Black and Gold or LSU at home with friends, Moe's has you covered. Order pulled pork, wings, ribs, sides, and more. Come in with the family for lunch and dinner as our kids' meals will please even the pickiest of eaters. Tailgating, parties at home, lunch and dinner, Moe's Barbecue will handle it all. Moe's Original Barbecue, 1101 North Causeway Boulevard between 48th and 49th Street in Metairie. Call 504-407-5333 for your catering order today. 504-407-5333. Moe's Original Barbecue in Metairie. Hardhide Ponchatoula Strawberry Whiskey is an 86 proof blend of aged wheat bourbon, American light whiskey, and fresh Ponchatoula strawberries. Blended in New Orleans, it is not for the thin-skinned. Look for it in your favorite stores, bars, and restaurants. NewOrleans.Football is proud to be sponsored by Firehouse Subs. Make sure you check out their location on Veterans Boulevard. All right, let's get into the show.
Let's get into our lead topic presented by Friend & Company Fine Jewelers. Go check out their new engagement salon. And while you're there, ask them about their fleur-de-lis earrings and necklace that you see I have on now. They are specially priced for our NOF audience. All right, let's get into the lead topic. The Saints go with the rookie undrafted kicker, Blake Grupe, over the 7-year veteran, Will Lutz. By far the biggest news of the day.
Yeah, and I think it's just kind of what we've been talking about. I think they wanted to go with the younger guy. He's one of the best 32 kickers in the league. They're going to keep him around. He's going to have longevity with the team, hopefully, assuming things work out. But I think this thing was neck and neck, and when it is neck and neck, those factors come into play. It's age, it's cost, it's how long is he going to be around? It's the last guy was injured for, 2 years ago for a whole year. Last year, he was shaky. So it's a comparison of upside versus a guy that's, kind of been a little bit rocky the last couple of years. I think we all would have made the opposite decision, that we would have went with Lutz probably, because we know Lutz, we know his downsides. It's just kind of like one of those things where it feels a little bit safer on that side. But they obviously feel like there's more upside with Grupe, and it's hard to argue with it. It makes a lot of sense. It's not something that has me up in arms or anything like that. They went with the younger guy who was the equal to the older guy. And sometimes you make shrewd decisions and they work. Sometimes they don't. And you end up cutting, the guy that you made a shrewd decision for at a specialist position a couple of years ago, a couple of years later. But hopefully this one doesn't turn out that way.
Yeah, to me, we've been talking about this. We've been talking about this since rookie minicamp.
We really
have.
have.
When Blake Grupe turned heads, and we're like, oh, this is going to be for real, huh? All off season.
It was a topic on the very first show that Brooke did with us.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And then obviously when we interviewed Lutz, and they had 2 kickers in the room with him originally before they got rid of Alex Quevedo. So You know, and it was worth all the breath we spent on it. It was worth all the running across the practice field to chart field goals during practice, which, you know, is something we don't have to do every year. A lot of, you know, so it was all summer long. As I said recently, though, the money wasn't going to be a factor for me. They save about $1 million. I mean, maybe some incentives Will Lutz would have had. The longevity, if the kicker's good enough, Will Lutz could have 10 years left in his career. You had to go with the kicker you trust to make the kicks this year. And I believe they did that. I don't think you make this decision just to save $1 million. This means I think that they trust Blake Grupe to make more kicks this year. And if they don't, then it's a horrible decision. But I think he earned it. The evidence is them choosing him. And I think he legitimately beat out real competition. I don't think Lutz lost this job. As evidence, Sean Payton just traded for Will Lutz. We've said a few times they're 2 of the 32, and apparently they were 2 of the 32. They are currently.
I don't know that it necessarily is that they trust one more than the other, because I heard some insight into how the meeting went, and it went down to the wire, and there were people on both sides of it. I honestly think that it was a very even battle. And then at the end of it, the youth was a factor. Like, it was a thing that came into play here. It was a topic that came up, and this was going both ways into their staff meeting. So it isn't a thing where I think they distrust Will and they trust Grupe more. I honestly believe, and based on how they argued this out, it was neck and neck, 2 guys that were basically the same. And it was just kind of, what are the deciding factors? And they went shrewd, and hopefully it works. Because if it doesn't, this is one of those things that blows up in your face and it doesn't go away. And then people, you know, look at you like you're crazy. But in this moment right now, I don't think that there was a bad decision. Like, I really don't. I think no matter what they did, we would have sat here and been like, that makes sense, because they were both that good. They were both that close, and there was not an obvious winner.
It will be second guessed, and it will be scrutinized. Yes. No matter who they picked.
Every week.
No matter who they picked, nobody is allowed. Like one of them can make 80, like Grupe can make 85% of his kicks, and every time he misses one, Twitter is going to blow up with, I can't believe the Saints did this.
He could make 95% of his kicks with 6 game winners, and if there's a 7th game where he misses one, Dennis Allen's an idiot. Like, that's just how people are going to react. But I mean, I don't think he's going to be bad. I think this kid can really kick the ball. I like his demeanor. I like his makeup. He's incredibly confident. I mean, he just exudes confidence. And I think he has a chip on his shoulder that's bigger than he is. And I mean, that's just kind of how he plays. So it's I don't know. Like, I just don't think that there's a bad choice.
The other thing about kicker, there are so many things you cannot replicate in the preseason and training camp with a lot of guys. We were just talking about to Brian Brzee about, like, yeah, you had a great summer. Now tackle Derrick Henry, you know, in a week. But the high stress environment that Blake Grupe was performing under this summer is as high stress. I mean, every kick, if he had a bad day at practice, it was over. And he never faltered. He never faltered. Even the 60-yard miss. Obviously, Dennis Allen and Darren Rizzi didn't hold against him. We didn't hold it against him. The leg he showed on it actually was a plus. So he never faltered in a very high-stress summer.
Yeah, and this battle was as close as we thought it was all throughout training camp. At some points, we were definitely leaning, I think, more toward Will Lutz, but then we would see Blake Grupe make these 50-plus yard field goals, and it's like, oh, he's here for a reason. I mean, this is a kid they have faith in. They saw something with him. They're going to give him a chance. There was no, we're just bringing him in here to push Will Lutz. I think it was equally to push Will Lutz, and if Will cannot return back to his old self, this guy might be the answer. But then it turned into, all right, you have 2 really good kickers. And I think the reason why, and I think it's fair to say this, and Will Lutz has been here for 7 years, the reason why it was such a hard decision, I think, for all 3 of us, for the coaching staff, everyone in general, is how much Will Lutz is loved in that locker room. He's a good guy, what he does for the community. I mean, he's created relationships and friendships with the people in this organization that's going to go far beyond just football. It's tough for him. We saw that with Zach Wood when we talked to him today. It's an incredibly emotional day. He's going to miss his guy. And even equally, Blake Gillikin, we're going to get into that a little bit later. But we did get a chance to talk to Blake Grupe after the decision was made. And he actually shared with us that him and Will had a conversation today.
I ran into him, as he was, making his way as everything was going on. Had a quick little chat. I know he has stuff to do today, and I had it as well. But he congratulated me. I congratulated him. We texted this morning before everything even went down. So there's by no means is there any animosity between us. I'm just thankful to be able to compete against a guy that pushed me. I pushed him. And, you couldn't have asked for a better guy to go up against.
The Saints don't go away from this trade empty-handed. They get a 2024 7th-round draft pick from the Denver Broncos. I think as equally as this was surprising with the kicker battle, we were just as surprised with the punter battle, that they are moving on from Blake Gillikin and keeping Lou Hedley, which to me, I think that battle was a little bit more lopsided in Blake Gillikin's favor, but obviously the Saints saw something different.
Maybe. I mean, Blake Gillikin was pretty inconsistent. I mean, I think we had that charted as a real battle because neither one of them was. It's kind of the opposite of kicker, where two kickers looked like they were winning. The two punters looked like they weren't winning for a lot of this summer. I know Nick has some insight on some of the things they liked about Hedley that we couldn't necessarily chart at practice. Like, he doesn't have the booming bigger leg. I mean, it's not going to be 60-yard punts, but I think they probably liked his consistency better. I think this shows. I do wonder how long-term this is going to be. He's going to be somebody who's going to have to prove he belongs over the course of the season, or Blake Gillikin maybe is a phone call away. Maybe other punters who got cut around the league are a phone call away. But I mean, it definitely proved what we were saying, that it did not feel like Blake Gillikin had returned to form. He obviously struggled last year. 2 years ago, he was as good as Morstead ever was. He was as good as any punter ever was. But it feels like he hasn't been able to recapture that.
But with that, though, Lou Hedley was also just as inconsistent. And so I felt like his inconsistencies were maybe greater than Blake Gillikin's. I mean, I can remember some Blake Gillikin punts from the preseason, and we all were like, oh, after watching it. But I felt like the inconsistencies were more from Lou Hedley, and he was more of, it kind of gets into what we were just talking about with the kicker. It's more of the unknown thing with Lou Hedley, but obviously the Saints are going with him, and for now. I think that's important we say that too, because we'll see what happens, who's on the market, what shakes out. But as of right now, he is the starting punter.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they were equally disappointed with both of them, to your point. So, I mean, yeah, there were times where I thought Hedley was definitely more inconsistent, especially like earlier in camp. Like Blake was showing a big leg, and then like Lou would too. He'd hang a punt for like 5 seconds, and then you have like 3.69. It was just kind of like, what's going on here? It's a fascinating decision to me. I could have seen it going either way. I don't think that there's like necessarily a bad choice. I know that they some of the stuff about Lou's style and just kind of how he gets out and does different things. Like it makes it a little bit better for the gunners to get down there, buys them a little bit more time. So I think that was maybe a slight deciding factor, but I don't know that this is a permanent decision by any means. I think he's out there trying to prove himself in week one, that he still deserves that job going forward. But yeah, I mean, this was another one where I think they kind of talked about it, and they didn't feel, where the kicker was like, man, we could go either way. It's like, man, we could go neither way with the punters. So I think it's just kind of one of those decisions. And I do think that they're probably looking at who got released, and they'll be looking a week from now and 2 weeks from now and 3. You're going to have to keep proving yourself. But hold on. But like the crazy thing about Gillikin is 2 years ago, to your point, like you literally could have made an argument that he was the MVP of the team. Like he won them games with his punts, and it just kind of like dissipated so fast. Like it's baffling to understand.
Yeah, no, well, when you said they're going to keep looking at who else got cut, I mean, I got excited. I know a lot of fans probably get excited when Thomas Morstead got cut today by the Jets, but Morstead quickly kind of debunked it. He might be one of those veterans that they're like, we're going to re-sign you tomorrow. Kind of, I don't know exactly. But if it's not this year, I bet there's still the possibility that Thomas Morstead one day comes back and finishes his career here if this doesn't go right with Lou Hedley. But even though I agree with you that Gillikin was like in the running for team MVP, the stakes feel a little lower. No offense to the punting profession. It's not going to feel like the game is on the line when the kickers are there. And if he struggles and you switch out 3 weeks into the season, it'll feel like nothing ventured, nothing gained. Whereas the kicker, we say, is going to be scrutinized heavily. The punter decision feels like, yeah, why not try it, see how he does. You can kind of try him out for a couple weeks in regular season games and be able to walk away. I think the value over replacement player available on the street, whether that's Blake Gillikin or someone else, is not too high. So you can probably move on from this decision. The kicker decision, they're going to have to eat it if they make the wrong decision.
Yeah, and we'll find out soon. We also got to hear from Lou Hedley as well. Here's what Lou had to say when asked about what the last 12 hours have been like for him.
Last night I probably didn't sleep very well. Coming into the building, it's a tough day for all the organizations in the NFL. You know, you see really close friends, you know, pack their bags and leave, which is tough. But yeah, just being, you know, anxious, nervous. But yeah, once I found out that, you know, I was the starting punter here going forward, a huge kind of relief off my shoulders. I think I can be a little more loose now, and kind of just, I think it'll help with my kicking for sure.
And look, we're talking about this decision, you know, punting numbers and stats and everything like that. We've done a disservice not to talk about Lou Hedley, the person.
Yeah.
I mean, this was actually I don't think we interviewed him all summer. We mentioned a little of his backstory when we were talking about undrafted rookies who could make the team. But he is a 30-year-old rookie. They went with the older guy by going with the rookie over Blake Gillikin. Australian rules football player. Now, a lot of guys have made that transition from Australian rules football to the NFL, but he was working as a professional scaffolder in Australia. He opened a tattoo shop in Bali in Indonesia for a while, and then he decided, like at whatever age, to give punting a try. Went to San Francisco City College before getting noticed by Miami. This guy's led a life, so if he sticks with the team, we got to get him in one of these chairs eventually.
We really do. He's just a fascinating guy. Also fascinating today, it wasn't just the kicker and punter that came as a surprise. Bradley Roby, our moment of the day presented by New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company, was the fact that Bradley Roby did get released from the team based on just what we've seen so far in training camp. I mean, he looked like the guy in the slot corner role. And obviously, this is another situation where what we see maybe isn't what's translating to behind the scenes with the coaching staff and things like that. Maybe not being the right fit, maybe not being the right fit in the locker room. We're not quite sure because the talent's there for Bradley Roby, but he gets released. He did say some nice things on social media about, you know, we wish the rest of the team well, the fans well, things like that, but he is on the move. So now what does that say about Alontae Taylor and their faith in him? And you got to talk to him today too.
Well, yeah, Roby also said some unnice things on social media too. So.
We'll show both tweets. We'll put them both up there.
Yeah, but look, I shocked, like when that one happened,
Completely.
We started like hearing rumblings that they were maybe trying to trade him yesterday, but then it turned into this. And I was surprised by all of it. I mean, it looked very much like they were set at the top of the depth chart with Roby there. And then Alontae Taylor was running third at slot corner behind Ugo and Roby. Yeah, I talked to Alontae today, and it's just kind of fascinating. He's like 2 days before the Houston game, like I started to adjust my thinking into being a slot cornerback, and he's like thinks that being in that mindset's going to allow him to get better at that role because he's embracing it and everything. Coaching staff thought the same thing. I reached out just so, you know, hey, like what's behind this decision here? Mm-hmm. And they just kind of like the way he thinks, and they think that the way he thinks is just going to just propel him into being great at it because Alontae isn't someone who like really can accept not being great at something. So they think he's just going to work at it, and who he is in week 1 won't be who he is in week 18 at that position. But I do think it is risky. Like what we saw, there were some ups and downs for sure from the slot. And he made a couple plays in this last game from the position, and he also gave up a couple in the last game. So I asked him about that too. And he said, you know, hey, look, it's not going to be perfect in week 1. I assume that there's going to be some stuff that goes wrong, but he's like, I'm not the type of person that's going to make the same mistake twice. So I am going to get better at it. So we'll see, but I do think this is a big risk for the defense.
If this had been their decision in February or March, I don't think any of us would have batted an eye. We probably thought this was the most likely scenario, that the 3 best corners were going to be Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor, and this is where they would fit best. But there's 2 things that do make this feel like a risk. One, I wrote a story, I think 2 weeks into OTAs and minicamp, where I talked to Bradley Roby, and it gave me a ton of confidence in the secondary. He had really embraced this role. He had played this role for Joe Woods before in Denver, and it made the pieces fit together in my mind, and it made me feel like they were so deep. And then 2, we've talked to Alontae Taylor a million times. He has not embraced this role. That's great that we're hearing now that he's embracing it, that he might take off. But that had not happened yet as of a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. He even really wasn't working in the slot that much early in training camp. So it feels like if you were going to do this should have been the plan full go since March. It feels like there's going to be, maybe you're right, by the end of the season, this works out great. But it feels like an adjustment period is inevitable. And it's kind of a risk I don't like to see this team taking early in the season. But ultimately, they're going to get to the point where I think we all thought they wanted to get eventually. But the timing of it all seemed weird. Bradley Roby was in that role all year long, and they're changing it now.
It seems forced because we did have a lot of confidence in Bradley Roby. I think all three of us can agree that we felt that way throughout all of training camp as we saw Alontae Taylor trying to figure it out in that position. And as you mentioned, I mean, it's going to be one of those situations where what happens if they don't figure it out? I mean, I know they always wanted to say we would need to find a way to put Marshall Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, and Alontae Taylor. We need to have them all on the field at the same time. We have to figure it out. But what if it just doesn't work? What's your backup? I know you have Ugo Amadi, but
I think he's part of the equation. I think he had such a good summer. But then again, we talked about when they traded away C.J. Gardner-Johnson last year is because they liked so many guys. And was it Justin Evans or something, like guys who nice summer didn't turn into nice season.
They're betting on it not being a letdown. And based on what you told us, you got a chance to sit down with Alontae Taylor by yourself today. It's crazy to me that just not even a week ago or a few days ago when we talked to him, his mindset had kind of changed of like, I'm just keeping my head down. I'm just trying to get on the field. I mean, that was his mindset. And now it's kind of flipped to the back to confident Alontae Taylor, who's like, this is my role. I'm going to do it. I think it's more of he's going to will himself to it because at this point, what are you going to do?
Yeah, look, I think everybody that plays cornerback wants to be an outside corner. I mean, and I'm not trying to say this is what Alontae's thinking, but outside corners get paid, they get the glory, they get the glamour, and the inside corners get like $8-9 million a year if you're the best at your position. So I think that's where he wants to be is on the outside, but he's accepting that he's a slot cornerback now. He's embracing it fully, and I didn't see any apprehension there. I kind of just saw like the shedding of like, okay, this is what I do now. I'm shedding this identity, and this is what I am now, and I'm going forward with it. To the Roby thing though, like I thought he was extremely solid. I was shocked by it, but I did go back and I looked because when you're wrong at something, okay, where did I get this wrong? What happened that I missed? And I went through every single pass in training camp. He broke up one pass the whole entire summer. One pass. I never thought he got cooked or anything, but he wasn't making plays. So, I mean, that's probably something that they were looking at too. And I'm sure that's a factor in it as well. But I do feel it's a little risky. I will say this, though. It is similar to last year, and they got through it just fine last year, getting rid of C.J. Gardner-Johnson.
After some bumps in the road.
Yeah. I like the bet better on Alontae Taylor than I did on Strap Harris. So, I mean, at least it makes sense in that way.
One other important factor in all this. This is all happening because Paulson Adebo killed it this summer, too. Like, he was the guy that we had a question mark on. He locked down that outside corner job that they both wanted so bad, and he made it. Alontae Taylor is either going to be the slot or he's going to be on the bench. I mean, that's what Adebo has done this summer.
Yeah.
That could change too. You know, Adebo could struggle in September and they might want to change things around. But once Adebo kind of won that battle, it was, well, we want Alontae Taylor on the field because we like Alontae Taylor so much. All three of us can agree with that. Like, we were very high on him. We put him in our top 20 Saints players on the roster this summer. Like, he doesn't belong on the bench. So if those are their top three corners, then Bradley Roby would have been a very expensive backup.
To your point, though, the one pass breakup, how many times have we heard from Dennis Allen and the defensive coaches that takeaways are premium right for them this year? They are valuing that in training camp. It's something they're continually talking about. They didn't have enough takeaways last season. I mean, that falls in line with it. If they're preaching that, then that's what they've been preaching all camp, and the move makes sense in that aspect. I don't know. I'd like to get more insight on why Bradley Roby left. Like, was it just football? I mean, I'd like to know the full capacity of it all because it is such a shocking move.
Yeah, it is. Look, one more thing just on Taylor too. I like his ability to make big hits. His run defense in the slot could be something that could be a huge asset to this team. And I know how much everybody loves CJ around here. CJ was a good run defender and a pretty poor player in coverage at times. Like, there were times that he was very boomer bust in that aspect. So if you just get that same level of play, you get the energy. If Alontae has some struggles in the slot, but he's making plays in run defense, if he can blitz, I bet he could probably blitz the hell out of the quarterback from the slot. And that's something that they'll make use of. I like those assets that he has. And then also when they drafted him, remember, like, everybody thought he might have been drafted to play safety, and some safety skills translate into the slot. Saints like players in the slot that have safety skills. So, like, there's things about his prototype that fit, like, the DA mold of defense probably a little bit more than Roby, who's, you know, a corner first, and then you're trying to add these assets into it. So maybe there's some playmaking ability there that's just not necessarily all coverage. But I think he's going to get the coverage down. I think he's going to get better at it. But all those things, I think he's got to learn. And last year we saw it too. There were struggles in his coverage at times on the outside. So I don't think he's going to be a perfect player. I think there's going to be highs. I think there's going to be lows. But hopefully by the end of the season, he just levels it out and he is who he can be in there.
With the Bradley Roby move, with the Will Lutz move, financially, it helps the Saints against the cap. We're going to get into that in our money segment presented by Jefferson Financial Federal Credit Union. You've got the number breakdown. I'm just going to let you take it.
Yeah. Now, look, I said the kicker, the money wasn't a big enough deal for me on that. They saved just under $1 million. Lutz was going to make $1.7 million this year. Groupie makes $750K. Lutz also had up to like $950,000 in possible incentives that he could have hit. Let's say they saved $1.5 million. Not bad. We're talking about this team's salary cap all the time. I don't think that's the only reason to make a move like that. It's a good tiebreaker. Roby, they saved some real money. He was due $3.5 million this year after he had taken a pay cut in recent years to stay on the team. And he was due $3.5 million up to $3.5 million in some incentives he really could have reached. If he was the full-time nickel playing 85% of the snaps, this team made the playoffs, he could have made $5.5 million this year. Now they go down to someone like Ugo Amadi or Isaac Yadam. Let's say that's the replacement player that's making $1.1 million. They might have saved $4 million with that move. Again, pay the $4 million if he's your best player, but if he was going to be their fourth corner, then there you go. There's like $5 million the Saints are going to have to work with on next year's cap after these two moves. That's a bonus element of it.
We are going to get into where we went wrong with our 53-man roster coming up next. Some more of the cuts that happened today. Plus, we're going to hear from you, the fans, hearing from you guys with our Martin Wine and Spirit question of the day. We'll have all of that right after the break.
Now, at New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company, get our $10.99 shrimp remoulade combos with zesty shrimp remoulade and fried shrimp or catfish for only $10.99. And did you hear? Soft-shelled crabs are back at New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company.
Are you tired of renting and ready to own your dream home? Contact Jefferson Financial Federal Credit Union, your trusted source for home loans. Our competitive rates and flexible terms can help make your home ownership dreams a reality. If you're a first-time home buyer or looking to refinance, our experienced lenders are here to help. Our online application process allows you to apply on your schedule. It's quick, easy, and convenient. Visit us online at jeffersonfinancial.org to learn more. Federally insured by NCUA, Equal Housing Lender.
At Turo, we were born for moments like this. From bringing new bundles of joy into the world, to delivering what new mothers need to stay healthy. Born to keep hearts beating strong, and to keep seniors active and healthy for years to come. Because at Turo, we deliver more than babies. From heart care to cancer care, and newborns to seniors. At Turo, we're born to care.
Martin Wine and Spirits is home to a selection of hand-picked barrel select bourbon, whiskeys, and much, much more. They are family owned and operated since 1946 and specialize in wine, spirits, gourmet food, gift baskets, catering, and tasting events. They have many locations, so they're never too far away. You can check them out in Metairie, New Orleans, Mandeville, and Baton Rouge, or if it's more convenient, you can always shop online. Whether you're a wine novice or a seasoned collector, you'll enjoy the Martin Wine and Spirit experience.
I'll take a New Orleans Saints scratch up. Play New Orleans Saints from the lottery. Just scratch, fold, and punch your way to winnings. Punch your ticket with New Orleans Saints. Win up to $100,000. Enter our second chance drawings, giving you a season to smile.
Welcome back into the Turo Hospital studio. Look, it wasn't just the specialists and Bradley Roby that caught us by surprise today. It was the fact that the Saints also released veteran linebacker Jalen Smith. The reason why this came as such a shock is we've been talking about him so highly in the Costa Mesa practices and the Saints-Chargers joint practices. He looked fantastic. He looked great in the 2 preseason games. Saints obviously seeing things a little differently. I personally thought it was in this order: Demario Davis, Pete Werner, Jalen Smith. not the case. But
It
he
was.
might
Yeah, it might still be.
It might
yeah.
still be. He could potentially come back in the next couple days, either on the practice squad or be signed if guys go on IR. We don't know the situation with Traquan Smith, but this was by far another bombshell for us seeing this come down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any way to rank them other than that order. We all watch the games. We all watch the practices. There is no way that there's a different order of those players. But again, this is one of those things where you do the autopsy of where was I wrong? Why did they see it differently? And I'm not so interested in my thoughts that I'm going to sit here and belabor points that we've made over and over. I thought Jalen Smith was the third best linebacker. I thought he was one of the best finds of the offseason. I think they need him on the team. All that aside, why did they do this? So you got to look at it like DA foreshadowed this, and we just did not make enough of his comment. We didn't make enough of it. Someone asked him about Jalen Smith, how he looks, how he needs to be on the team. Looks great on defense. He's doing all these things well, has good range, but if he's going to make the team, he needs to find a role on special teams. So he never found a role on special teams. So he's not on the team any longer. So there's 48 guys that are active every week on Sunday. If you aren't doing anything at all, it's hard to have a backup linebacker just standing there waiting for two people to get hurt so he can get on the field. It's a bad allocation of resources. I understand it from that point of view. Now, if you have injuries at linebacker and Jalen Smith isn't on your practice squad or he isn't like stashed on your roster somewhere, I'm scared. I'm terrified of it. I would find a way to keep him around in some capacity because I don't want to have to see the other linebackers play if I know Jalen Smith is an option. But I get it. You got 48 guys, and if he's not breaking a sweat, like what's his purpose? So I get it, but it's hard to understand at the same time.
We're pretty good about that too. I mean, how many times have we told everyone why Traquan Smith is going to be the fourth receiver and Shaq Davis and A.T. Perry can't play that role? You can't just have pass catchers at receiver. You need a blocker at receiver. You need special teams players at every position. We usually do a good job of identifying that. What did it for me, I even had Jalen Smith as probably making the team until we saw him take over the Sam role. When he started playing Sam with the ones, I was like, they found a spot for him. This is where he'll get his snaps. This is how they get him on the team. But ultimately, they didn't like him, I guess, as the Sam better than Zach Bond. Like, I thought he could play that Caden Ellis role from last year. But yeah, he's never played special teams in his career. And it's hard to be the third. Right. We're about to talk about another one that we were on the fence about, Andrus Peat, if he's going to be a sixth offensive. I mean, you have to have certain skill sets to be a backup. Jalen Smith looks like a starter. If they need a starter, you're exactly right. He's the first person I'd want in the starting lineup. But this is a reminder of special teams gets guys. Isaac Yadam's on this team. DeMarco Jackson's on this team. Nephi Sewell's on this team. Those
Zach
decisions
Bond.
always matter. Yeah, Zach Bond. I mean, those decisions always matter. It's where will you play your 20 snaps on Sunday?
Yeah, and that gets into where we were wrong, at least Nick and I on this front. We were wrong to have Andrus Peat as a surprise cut. I mean, I think the reasons were ones that you could take into consideration. The injuries, you've got younger guys coming in, but when you look back at the roster and the guys that they did keep, I still think they might go searching for some backup guards. We'll see what happens after the next couple days, who the Saints are eyeing. I think it'd be crazy to think that Doug Marrone doesn't have his eyes on a couple guys around the league, but maybe Andrus Peat's a little bit healthier than we thought. I mean, he is a massive guard. Like, when he's healthy and he's playing at his best, he fits in there. We just, to me, haven't seen his best camp.
Yeah. I was trying to predict a surprise one too. Just you kind of got
it was a surprise cut. We never said it was a sure thing.
Yeah, and I always thought that he probably would end up making the team. But yeah, I was trying to predict one. You're looking at it. Okay, maybe Mike had made some like really valid points on him too before. Just like, if he's not a starter, you got the money, all that stuff. Like, what's his place on the team if he's not starting? You're looking at it. You're thinking maybe there's some young guys that could come on. I think it's something that was probably even discussed though. I don't think it was that outrageous.
Well, here's the biggest difference. His we said this the other day, and this is ultimately one of the reasons why I didn't really consider cutting him, is he got it all guaranteed. He got it in the form of a signing bonus and a guaranteed. If it wasn't guaranteed, he could be Bradley Roby right now.
He's 5 months away.
Yeah. Once you're the backup,
that's a good point.
You can't be a $5 million backup always. I mean, that's a nice luxury to have every once in a while, but that's a dangerous place to live in the NFL, as Bradley Roby proved with the one we didn't see coming.
I think if some of these young guys had just looked a little bit better, like he really might have been on the ropes, because he's done. Like it's over for him in January. He's no longer going to be a Saint unless they re-sign him, which I don't think they will.
Meanwhile,
so
I was really surprised Calvin Throckmorton got cut.
Yeah.
A cheaper guy who could have been a backup at guard and center. You guys were right on Max Garcia. They had to have a backup center, and it's going to be veteran Max Garcia. But Landon Young making the roster. We'll find out if he gets put on IR tomorrow, but probably a good sign that he's going to be healthy enough. And I guess if you've got Pete as a backup guard, and if you've got Landon Young, the rookie Nick Saldivari, Max Garcia, there wasn't enough room for Calvin Throckmorton.
Yeah, and on the flip side of things, guys that we put on our 53-man roster projection that is on our website, you can see the ones where we missed on those. Guys I had on the roster were in Ellis Merriweather. I didn't see Kirk Merritt coming out of anywhere. I was very shocked, but it gets back to that special teams role. That's where he won it, and maybe we had the blinders onto that as like, ooh, like this young running back, like what can he do? But it's, you truly have to be the well-rounded player. Jonathan Abram, I was coin tossed between him and Lonnie Johnson. I had Anthony Johnson making the team. He did not. And I think with those two, especially with the defensive backs, with talking with some of the coaches, like they had tough decisions to make at both linebacker and defensive back. Those were the two that they had highlighted that were going to be pretty difficult because of the fact that you had a lot of talent in the room, but not necessarily guys that made separation at the end of camp.
Yeah, look, to your point on Kirk, though, like I also think that maybe some of that suit of Alvin not being around for the first 3 weeks, and you aren't going to be as limited. Like you can still call everything. You might not necessarily have the running back in the number one progression with Kirk Merritt out there instead of Alvin, but you can still run your same concepts because you have a guy that can go out there and run these different routes and all that stuff. So I think that he's probably short time and he needs to make his case in these 3 weeks to stick around beyond that. But yeah, I didn't see that one coming at all. I thought it was going to be Ellis. None of us thought Kirk was going to make the team.
It's a good point though, and you had kept saying this to me. Are you sure you want to keep these undrafted rookies? They're probably going to end up on the practice squad. And
there's
but
no
Shaq
shame.
Davis and Ellis Merriweather, I think, could very well be on the practice squad.
There's no shame in predicting Shaq Davis,
Yeah.
Ellis Merriweather, and Anthony Johnson to make this team. As long as they pass through waivers, they'll be the first 3 guys back on this practice squad.
The practice squad.
Yeah, look, I did write with the running backs. I at least lumped Merritt in with Darrell Williams and Ellis Merriweather as I predicted none of them to make the team, and I thought they might all hang around on the practice squad and they might elevate one on game day. The only thing about Ellis Merriweather is he does a lot of the same things that Jamal Williams and Kendra Miller do, and Kirk Merritt brings that different skill set in both the passing game as a former wide receiver and special team.
I also had Calvin Throckmorton and Storm Norton. Did you have those guys too making the team?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
I think it's just because the offensive line, you think about all the injuries, I think we probably went heavy. I think maybe we predicted 10?
No, you guys picked 9, but you didn't have
9.
Landon Young.
Okay, yeah.
You didn't have Pete and Landon Young for that reason. Pete and Landon Young have battled injuries. You wanted healthy guys.
We'll see what happens. I think still the offensive line across the board, I think they're good at center right now, but I think I could still see them going after tackles and guards.
They could look. We keep talking about, are they going to pass their guys through waivers? We could wake up tomorrow morning and find out the Saints have claimed guys on waivers. Yeah. It's not out of the question.
I don't love their offensive line depth. It's a little bit scary.
Nobody
right now.
does.
Yeah.
I think if you could pick anything right now, that if you're looking at the roster holistically and also taking backups into consideration, is there a group you're more scared of than the backup offensive line right now?
Backup linebackers are right back on that list without Jalen Smith for me. I'm
backup
still concerned
receiver.
about
I don't love
him.
backup receivers.
Yeah.
Second strings are a little. I think the reason we're most scared of the backup offensive line is because A, we've seen it derail this team 2 years in a row, and B, the starters almost across the board have battled injuries except for Eric McCoy.
There's still a lot of questions at wide receiver too. We haven't seen Rashid Shaheed back in the fold. What's going on with Traquan Smith?
Shaheed has been back at practice. He's
but not
limited,
fully.
He's
limited.
He was even dressed for the game, so I like his timetable. But yeah, you're right.
If you're thinking about timetable, like, is he going to be Rashid Shaheed 100% week 1? Probably not. And you're hoping that Michael Thomas stays healthy this year. Chris Olave is kind of a lock. He's going to be fine. But outside of that, you kind of get into the crosshairs, and I think that's it gets into the good reason why they have 4 tight ends to kind of maybe make up for those things.
Yeah, Jimmy Graham's basically a receiver.
Yeah.
But to your point on Rashid Shaheed, I think he'll play in week 1. But we talk all the time about Michael Thomas being an injury risk. I'm almost more concerned about Rashid Shaheed being an injury risk after we've seen this continued pattern throughout his career, as a smaller guy who has now been hurt, 3 different times.
All right, you were at practice today. Any wild observations?
No, I mean, we actually took attendance at practice today, of
course, it's the
as
biggest
opposed
thing after
to
cuts,
the 50.
right.
But like Marshawn Lattimore's still not out there.
Yeah.
They keep saying it's minor. There's no structural damage, and they're just being as smart as possible. Great, be as smart as possible with Marshawn Lattimore. But I personally feel better when I see him out there practicing. Jameis Winston wasn't out there today. He says that's probably, Dennis Allen said that's probably day-to-day. Taysom Hill was stretching, not out there. I have a feeling, though, the very first Wednesday that we're out there, we're going to see all 53 guys, except for maybe Traquan Smith and Landon Young. And we'll find out tomorrow if those guys go on short-term IR.
What if Marshawn Lattimore is not ready to go week 1?
Not ready to think about that.
Don't
he's
speak
gonna be though. I don't think that's a concern.
I'm not putting that into, but like he hasn't been at practice, and it's
well, then they're screwed.
We'll see what happens.
Alante's playing.
They
on
wouldn't
the
have cut
outside.
Bradley Roby today.
I mean,
if they were worried about that.
They said it hasn't been a concern. Like he's got some knee swelling, but none of it's structural damage. But I just if a guy's not on the field yet and has still been off.
Alante played DeAndre Hopkins great last year. Don't want to see it. I want to see Marshawn on him. Like that's the matchup I want to see. I don't think it's a concern though. Everything I've heard is that it's going to be okay. Like it's not a big deal. It's going to be fine. You know, I think Marshawn's just going to take his time with it. He's not going to come back out until he's 100%. There's no need to even be practicing this week. Just be good to go.
And today's practice was
you got
this
a week.
was not a
be back Wednesday.
There was no Nick's observations from practice today on the site. First of all, because they kicked us out, but second of all, because this was basically a walkthrough. They're starting now to walk through some Titan stuff. The real practices won't really start till next week. It'll be a long weekend for these guys getting some rest.
Yeah, and be sure to stay locked in on NewOrleans.Football for all of those observations. All right, let's get into our question of the day presented by Martin Wine & Spirit. Martin Wine & Spirit is home to a wide selection of hand-picked barrel select bourbon, whiskeys, and more. The question is, who do you think is the returner for kickoff and punter, Shaheed or someone else? And it's a good question. We actually got a question like this last week that we wanted to ask, but we kind of wanted to see, all right, how does the initial 53-man roster shape up so we can answer this realistically?
I think it's Shaheed. I mean, obviously, he's going to be the guy. I'd be interested to know who everybody else would pick next, though. My guy, like I'm going to Alante. When he was out there returning, the few times he did it, his speed and just fluidity and how he moved just popped, and it made him look like an alien compared to everybody else. And that's why he is a 4-3 guy, and he moves the way he does, and why they're putting him in the slot, because he can go side to side, and he is that fast. Just the eye test, it was crazy. Like he just was exploding at practice the few times they were doing it. That's where I would go if I couldn't have Shaheed back there.
I think it's a valid question because we talked about Rashid Shaheed's durability, and it's like, is he too important to the offense to risk hurting him on kickoff and punt returns? But I actually think you need to get the ball in Shaheed's hands. I mean, on the offense, they've only figured out how to get it in his hands 4 or 5 times a game. I want him getting the ball, and it's worth the risk to me because he's so dynamic as a punt returner and kick returner. The two other names I'll throw out there as backup options, we just said it, Kirk Merritt. I actually asked Dennis Allen today that specific Alvin Kamara question. I go, was that a big part of why you guys kept Kirk Merritt? Because he can fill in that Alvin Kamara role during the first few weeks and you keep your offense intact. And he said, yeah, a little bit, but special teams is a big part of it. Merritt had only one kickoff return this year, but he had 2 last year in the preseason, including a 59-yarder that helped him stick around. So, the other guys who returned kickoffs, Lynn Bowden, gone. John Trey Kirkland, gone. Ellis Merriweather, gone, or at least might be back on the practice squad. So I think Kirk Merritt is their backup kickoff returner, and Ugo Amadi has done a ton of punt returning. I think he's probably their backup punt returner right now.
Ugo Amadi's looked okay.
Yeah, where would you guys go though? If it's not Rashid, who you going
I actually
with?
have liked what I've seen from Ugo Amadi just from like charting every once in a while, because with special teams we a lot of the time will watch what's going on around it. You know, how's everybody looking? But to me, Ugo Amadi has looked good. Alante Taylor's just the interesting one. It's what is it going to look like out there during the flow of a game?
I honestly think if something happened to Rashid Shaheed, like if he went on IR, I think they might bring back a Lynn Bowden or find a return specialist that's on the street and bring them in. I think that's an important enough role that you don't just make
what about
it somebody's
Taysom?
side
Do you go
job.
to Taysom? Taysom's always
They've done that
option
before.
too.
They've done that before.
I think I really think it'd be. I really think they go to a lot. Like just based on what we saw at practice, I don't know how you.
Why do you think he never did it once in the preseason then?
He looks great at it though.
Yeah.
So and he's outstanding at it, and you put him out there if you need him. I mean, there's different guys that go into that role. Taysom never returned one in the preseason either. I mean,
true.
But I think he's good at it. It's probably. In an emergency, if you needed him, I think he's definitely on that list. But like his speed and agility is crazy in that. Like I think that guy with the ball in his hands, like he's going to make stuff happen.
One more guy that we should mention in this conversation, Kendra Miller. He only returned one kickoff in the preseason, but that's absolutely another guy. that they probably aren't going to get as many touches as he deserves this year. So that's another area where they could get the ball in his hands.
I think durability is important for him too, especially after that little flare-up knee injury that he had after the significant knee injury. So maybe he doesn't get as many reps there.
You got to give him the ball somehow. I mean, you can't just keep him behind glass. He's a special player. Yeah.
Well, we will continue to have much more content this week. Look, this is the initial 53-man roster, but things are going to be turning and changing in the next 2 days. We will be back out at Saints practice tomorrow. And make sure you are subscribing and liking on YouTube and also following along on NewOrleans.Football. We've got some new content coming out in September that you won't want to miss. We'll see you next time.